Hello, it is I, Rtyuiope from Rtyuiope's Gameroom, and last month we took our first step into the Yakuza series with Yakuza 0, and this month really won't be any different. Today we are taking a look at the remake of Yakuza 1, Yakuza Kiwami, and by extension, Yakuza for PS2. As mentioned in the last video, Yakuza was a series that I was a little bit skeptical about since my first foray into the series was with Yakuza Dead Souls. But now that I've given the series an honest try, starting with 0, then moving on to Kiwami, I can say without an ounce of doubt that this series is quickly on its way to become one of my favorites. But what do I feel about Yakuza Kiwami in comparison to 0? Does Yakuza for PS2 still hold up? Which version should you play between the two? I hope to answer all these questions from my personal experience with the series thus far, so without further ado, let us dive deep into Kumuracho and step into the shoes of Kazuma Kiryu one more time. Before we talk about the development of Yakuza Kiwami, I think it is important to talk about the development of its previous iteration, Yakuza or Rtyuiope for PS2. The game was developed and published by Sega and directed by Rtyuiope. The game was released on PS2 on December 8th, 2005 in Japan and September 2006 for the rest of the world. The game was later ported to PS3 and Wii U in 2012 and 2013 respectively. The game was first conceived under the project title Project J. The series producer, Toshihiro Nagoshi, said that he wanted to create a gritty and realistic crime drama with humanity to it. And the game received a $21 million budget. The team behind Rtyuiope was a melting pot of various Sega developers spanning from people from Virtua Fighter, Monkey Ball, Panzer Dragoon, and even Jet Set Radio. With this many varied individuals working on the game behind the scenes, it had a lot of potential to stand on its own and become a classic. The development team was made up of two separate groups, with one group writing the game's dark and engaging story, while the other half, which is responsible for the infamously goofy side quests. The Japanese novelist Heisei Sishu, known for his work on The City of Lost Souls and Sleepless Town, was behind the central plot, and he would go on to later write Rtyuiope 2 as well, but would later sever his ties with the series after that. After the game was released, it was only a matter of time before it was localized by Sega's USA department. Once the game made it stateside, the name was changed from Rtyuiope to the now infamous Yakuza title. After that, the game received an aggressive marketing campaign in various magazines and websites. The game's localization would become infamous due to its dubbing cast, which included actors as big as Mark Hamill himself. Initially, the team wanted to include the dub of the original Japanese audio in the game, but due to limitations they were not able to achieve this goal. Now, fast forward 10 years later, in 2016 the Yakuza team decided to remake the game on the Yakuza 0 engine. The goal of this remake was to include a better resolution, frame rate, textures, loading time, and even added story events. Also a few side quests, and some re-recorded music, and improved gameplay. That is a big undertaking if you ask me. The main purpose to go for a remake instead of another port was to better tie the game with Yakuza 0's story by adding callbacks and references to it. And for the most part, I think they accomplished this goal they set out for themselves, but I will go more in depth with that in just a minute. The art style for both versions of the game are trying to capture realistic representation instead of an artistic interpretation. Obviously, the PS2 version doesn't hold up too well, but that's not to say it's bad. In fact, it holds up better than some PS2 games, but in comparison to Kiwami, the difference is night and day. The music for both versions of the game mostly comprise of rock and techno, but Kiwami does re-record and remix some of the songs, adding some more EDM type sounds to it. Some of my favorite songs on both versions of the soundtrack include I Receive You, Vertical Point, Funk Goes On, and For Whose Sake. Both versions of Yakuza are third-person action-adventure games with some RPG elements. However, both versions approach it sort of differently. The original Yakuza has one of my least favorite features in any video game ever, and that is fixed camera angles. Some of my favorite games like Devil May Cry and Legacy of Kain Defiance lose some of their enjoyment value thanks to this incredibly annoying feature. Now, sure, it can add a supposed cinematic feel to the game, but really in most cases it becomes a hindrance thanks to usually making it so that you cannot see what you're doing, and for flipping the controls almost every time you enter another screen. It really is a feature that gets under my skin, and thankfully it seems to be a feature that is becoming less and less relevant in the modern gaming sphere. But I, of course, digress. The original game is a very bare-bones version of a Yakuza game that we are used to today. Nonetheless, it is still very interesting to take a look back at the series' humble beginnings. The combat utilizes the ability to use weapons on top of being able to pull off QTEs, or quick time events, during certain moves. The enemies can appear at random, and battles usually consist of fighting a leader and some henchmen. When you beat the leader, the battle will end, which is a feature I wish was present in more modern Yakuza games. There are some mini-games which include batting cages, casino games, and everyone's favorite claw game. Now, Yakuza Kiwami kinda takes more after Yakuza 0 than the original, which is perfectly fine, I feel. The game gets rid of god-awful fixed camera angles in favor of a controllable camera, which makes the game so much more bearable to me. There are still some random encounters, however they can be usually pretty easily avoided. The combat takes after Yakuza 0 with its fighting styles. The fighting styles include the balanced brawler style, the damage-heavy yet slow beast style, the weaker yet quick rush style, and the uber-weak at first, but can be incredibly OP later dragon style. Most of these styles can be upgraded at your leisure given that you have the XP to spend. Unlike Yakuza 0 where you upgrade your skill tree through money, you have to upgrade your skill tree through XP points. These points can be obtained through side quests, battles, story, and so on and so forth. My biggest problem with the EXP in this game is that after you upgrade all your skill trees that take EXP, you can't exchange it for anything and it just piles up on the top of your screen, which sucks because they could have at least done something with it. Maybe exchange it for CP to use at Mr. Clownman or something, I don't know. But, who knows. But as I briefly mentioned, some of the skill trees take EXP. The only exception to that is the Dragon Style. The Dragon Style can be upgraded by talking to Master Splinter in Hobo Land, or by fighting Goro Majima in my favorite feature in this entire game. Oh yes, one of the things they added to Yakuza Kiwami that wasn't in the original is the inclusion of the Majima Everywhere system. And it's pretty, self-explanatory. You'll randomly encounter Majima while strolling through Kumaracho. He will appear in a variety of different disguises and will often hide on rooftops, sewers, cars, and traffic cones. You really aren't safe, but progressing through the Majima Everywhere system bar will allow you to unlock some abilities for the Dragon of Dojima style. And if you're worried that the Majima Everywhere system will become too much of a hindrance, don't worry. Because while he will appear often, it's not often enough that it should distract you or take away from the main experience. And it is especially worth it in the end because you get the full Dragon of Dojima style, which just wrecks most opponents. Like seriously, the sumo slap will be your best friend. One criticism I often hear about Yakuza Kiwami is that it's simply too easy, because it takes after old game design and tries to mix it with new game design, thus rendering any challenge from the original null and void, which is a load of crap. This game still delivers considerable challenge, especially on higher difficulties, and I would venture to say that this game is probably harder than Yakuza 0 in some respects. The game adds new minigames on top of the previous minigames, such as Mesu King, which is basically the same as cat fights from Yakuza 0, just a little bit more improved, and now turned into a card game. For kids. Yeah. Oh, and Pocket Circuit is back. Also, side quests are back, and they are just as ridiculous as ever, except this time the side quests actually feel worth the effort because you receive EXP for side quests, which in 0 sometimes you just receive items. There's also a running gag of con artists throughout most of the side quest story, which is just so hilarious that it's hard to even put into words. Hello and welcome to another episode of Physical Editions. As you can see, this episode will be a little bit darker than usual, just because my lamp died. However, I hope it doesn't derail too much from the actual game here. Unfortunately, I only own a physical copy of Yakuza Kiwami, and not Yakuza for PS2. I did end up emulating that for this episode, so I could give you my insight on that game, and I plan on picking it up at some point, and if I do, I will definitely go back and do physical editions of that game. But until then, we are going to have to settle with Yakuza Kiwami here, which comes in a pretty cool steelbook edition, as you could maybe read right there if you can make it out at all. So here we just have a slipcover for Yakuza Kiwami. We have Kazuma Kiryu, Akira Nishikiyama, and Haruka right there in the middle. And on the back, they have some standard shots of the game, Sega rating, the Dragon of Dojima returns, all that fun stuff. And it also has a slipcover, which has a really cool thing where you can see a little Haruka here in the middle, but if you remove the slipcover off, if I can do that with one hand, you can see that Kazuma Kiryu and Haruka are right there with each other, which is pretty cute, and I like that a lot. On the back, we have the koi fish, which is Nishiki's tattoo, and the Dragon of Dojima, or just, the dragon, which is Kiryu's tattoo. And on the inside, you just got your standard warning label right here. Don't play games too long or else you'll die, kind of deal. And here's just the cool disc with nice little disc art featuring Nishiki and Kiryu on it. And then I believe, I'll just remove the disc here, it is just a picture of Kumuracho on the inside. Nothing more. But it's still a neat little steelbook edition. Nice thing to have on your shelf. I wish that Yakuza Kiwami had a steelbook edition here stateside so that, I could have both in steelbook. And the upcoming Kiwami 2 will also be in steelbook. So, that kind of sucks that I can't have them all steelbook, but that's just the world we live in. That's how things have to be, and that's fine. Overall, I'd say it's a pretty good physical edition. There's not much to it, which is fine. It didn't need to have too much to it, especially since this is the part when Sega's actually realizing that, hey, what the heck, maybe Yakuza is actually pretty interesting here stateside, and it started to pick up some popularity. So overall, it's a nice little edition that you can pick up. It's probably more. I don't even think there's a standard edition. I've only ever seen a steelbook edition, so yeah, it's not too expensive either. You can usually pick it up for $19 at the time of this recording, which isn't bad at all. And I definitely say it's worth picking up if you thoroughly enjoy this game or just want to collect the Yakuza games. All in all, I say good physical edition. This has been Physical Editions, and I hope to see you next time. Peace. The story once again follows Kazuma Kiryu as his adoptive brother Akira Nishikiyama kills their Yakuza boss to protect someone. Kiryu takes the blame so that Nishiki won't have to face prison, so now Kiryu has to spend the next 10 years in prison. Once Kiryu leaves prison, he is hit with culture shock as the world around him has changed so much since the last time he was on the streets. And on top of that, the love of his life has disappeared and Nishiki is now kind of an asshole. And as if Kiryu did not have enough on his plate, he takes care of Haruka, a little girl he finds in a shot-up bar. The story in both versions is kind of the same, except with two major differences. Yakuza Kiwami includes a little backstory flashbacks for Nishiki, which tells you how he turned into the monster that he has become. And now Majima plays somewhat of a bigger role in the story than he did before, playing as more of a rival to Kiryu than in the original. Both of these plot threads I really feel breathe more life into the narrative and the world that the game sets up, and I really think it's an honest improvement over the original. And as I mentioned, there are some callbacks to Yakuza 0. Kiryu mentions Tachibana, and Majima mentions his old cabaret he works at. There's a few more sprinkled in here and there, but it's not too distracting from the original story. It's just a nice little callback that you could notice after playing Yakuza 0, which I think really helps breathe more life into the world, as I previously said. So, at the end of the day, what do I think of Yakuza Kiwami and by extension Yakuza 1? I think they're both great games and both are worth a play if you have the money and time, and you definitely won't regret it. Yakuza is a dark and endearing game that started a franchise full of twists and turns, and Yakuza Kiwami is a worthy remake of the first game. I recommend adding both to your collection as you will not regret it. So far the Yakuza series has yet to disappoint me, except for, that. And unfortunately, due to how things are going with the localization of the Yakuza series, I will not be able to cover the next game until August when Yakuza Kiwami 2 comes out, which will be similar to this video where I'll review both Kiwami and the original Yakuza 2 and compare and contrast. So, until then, no more Yakuza videos. Maybe I'll talk about some news and things like that. As for next month, however, I'll be reviewing Shin Megami Tensei Strange Journey Redo for 3DS. Also, a little update on content. I'll try to sprinkle in not only my monthly reviews, but I'll try to add in some more like little news videos and things like that. As in, this month I hope to release a video alongside this Yakuza Kiwami review with E3 expectation videos. Hopefully that shouldn't take too long to make, and I think it should be out relatively soon, if not this month, then the very beginning of next month. So, thank you for your patience. I hope to give you more content, some more personal conversations between me, myself, and I. And, yeah, that's just some stuff I wanted to let you guys know about the future of Rtyuiope's Game Room. Anyway, this is Rtyuiope from Rtyuiope's Game Room, signing out. Hey, just in case you didn't know, I did start a Patreon. Don't feel obligated to send any money my way, but if you do, I'd greatly appreciate it, and you'd be able to gain access to things such as my personal Discord, where it's really small and a really tight-knit community, where we talk and conversate about various video games, share our collections, and even suggest games for me to review. Even if it's just $1, that would help me a long way and help improve Rtyuiope's Game Room's quality and let it continue throughout the years. I at least appreciate you taking into consideration and just listening to me ramble here. Anyway, I appreciate the views that you've been giving me, the subscriptions, the comments, all that. Keep that coming, and I greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.